Hello, 7th graders on Team Intrepid. This is a video from Mrs. Hines and Mrs. Gale. Sorry we are not here today to start you off on this project, but we felt that if we made a video, it might make more sense so you can start this project. This is a 2-day project. You will have Monday today to work on it, and then tomorrow, and then it will be due either Tuesday or you can turn it in Wednesday at school. So this is a mini project. It is evaluating Reconstruction from multiple perspectives. So just a reminder, the 10-year period after the Civil War is known as the Reconstruction era. Much of the South lay in ruins with a devastated economy, while radical Republicans and the president battled in Washington, D.C. over how to readmit the Southern states. For many Southerners, this was a difficult time. However, Reconstruction also provided new opportunities for newly freed slaves, carpetbaggers, and others that had never been possible before. Directions. You're going to select one of the short biographies that follow, and then think about how this person would feel about Reconstruction. Would he or she benefit from certain parts of it? Would he or she feel angry over anything? Use the links above to research more about each aspect of Reconstruction listed on this worksheet. You also can use all of the slideshows that have been posted in Canvas for the last 2 weeks. You're going to list the name of your character on the worksheet. Then, for each characteristic of Reconstruction listed on the chart, you're going to check off whether your character would feel positive about it or have negative feelings about it and explain why. For example, if a woman experienced enslavement, she would feel very positive about the 13th Amendment, which banned slavery in America. But if the person that you chose was a Confederate soldier or a plantation owner from the South, they would feel negative about the 13th Amendment because that freed slaves. When you are done, total up your positives and negatives and think about how your character would feel about Reconstruction overall. Use the characteristics to write a paragraph, 5 sentences at least, explaining why your character would feel that Reconstruction was either a success or a failure. Again, this will be due on Tuesday, but then if you don't get it done on Tuesday, you will be able to turn it in Wednesday at the beginning of class. So these are the 6 characters you can choose from. So you're only going to choose one of these. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about them with you. First character, a formerly enslaved woman from Mississippi. This woman spent her entire life enslaved in Mississippi. She finally gained freedom at the age of 64 when the Union Army seized the plantation she was forced to work just before the Civil War came to an end. While freedom was a glorious feeling, with no money, land, or education, she is worried about what the future holds. Her primary concern is finding her 3 children who were sold years before when the plantation owner was in debt. She hopes that Mississippi will soon be readmitted to the United States and that the national government will provide some aid and assistance in creating a new life. Now character number 2, a plantation owner from Virginia. This man was the owner of what was one of the largest plantations in the South before the war. At one time, he enslaved more than 200 men, women, and children and generated immense wealth growing and exporting cotton from a massive plantation in southern Virginia. Now that the war is over, his future is very uncertain. Upon being readmitted to the country, he must honor the 13th Amendment, which outlawed slavery, and realize that this reality is inevitable. Above all, though, he hopes to maintain a high social and economic status despite the changes to Southern life that may occur following the war. Character number 3, poor white farmer from Georgia. This man has returned home, a small farm, after 3 years of serving in the Army of Northern Virginia. He fought under the command of Robert E. Lee, hoping that he could preserve the Confederacy. Now that the war is over, He finds that the livestock on his farm were slaughtered by the Union Army while passing through on Sherman's March, the campaign where the Union Army destroyed everything in its path. He has very little money and resources to make a good living now. He will also be competing for limited economic resources in the South with other poor farmers and thousands of formerly enslaved men and women. He is concerned that these African Americans will push for change in traditional Southern society when they begin to vote. Character number 4, female teacher from Massachusetts. This 55-year-old school teacher from Massachusetts has been a teacher her entire adult life. During her career, she has educated both white and African American children. Before the war, she was very involved in reform movements and attended the Seneca Falls Convention, where Elizabeth Cady Stanton delivered the first speech demanding women's rights, the Declaration of Sentiments. Later, she became involved in the abolitionist movement and even contributed writing to William Lloyd Garrison's anti-slavery newspaper, The Liberator. Now that the war is over, she is primarily concerned with the treatment of former slaves in the South. She cares deeply about the welfare of those who experienced enslavement and hopes the national government will take an active role in protecting them and helping them adjust to new life. Character number 5, a radical Republican congressman. This congressman represented the Union state of Ohio, was a supporter of Abraham Lincoln, but believed his plan for Reconstruction was too lenient toward the South. He believes that the South must meet many requirements before being allowed to send their representatives to Congress and rejoin the country. He is primarily concerned with protecting the rights of those freed from slavery and punishing Confederate officers who led the rebellion against the United States. Also, he believes Congress should have control over creating a plan for Reconstruction, while the president merely sees to it that the plan is carried out. And your last character to choose from, former general in the Confederate Army. As a former officer in the Confederate Army, this man is very concerned about his fate. He is unsure of how the national government will treat him once his state is readmitted to the Union. Will he regain full citizenship despite leading a war against his own country? When he returned home to the South, his plantation was no more. His home had been burned by the Union Army, and the 24 men and women he kept in slavery were still living on the plantation with no other prospects. At the very least, he hopes his state will quickly be allowed to rejoin the country and once again be able to determine its own affairs. He is concerned that if those freed from enslavement are given the right to vote, they might push for changes in traditional Southern society. So again, these are the 6 characters you can choose from. You're going to just choose one of them when you're doing this mini project. You have this paper now in front of you. You should have picked it up when you walked in my classroom. Evaluating Reconstruction. Directions. For each characteristic of Reconstruction, check whether your character would think it was positive or negative and explain why. So write your name on this paper, and then once you've chosen your character, write down on this line which one you chose. You could write that female teacher from Massachusetts. You could write the plantation owner, the radical congressman. Then you're going to look at each of these 10 things on the left. We have the 13th Amendment, 14th Amendment, 15th Amendment. Remember, those are the 3 Reconstruction amendments. Lincoln's assassination, the Ku Klux Klan, black codes, carpetbaggers and scalawags, Freedmen's Bureau, sharecropping, and finally poll taxes and literacy tests. You're going to check on this box or this box whether you think your character would think the 13th Amendment would be positive or would they think it's a negative. Once you check the box, then you will tell me why. So for example, if I had chosen the formerly enslaved woman from Mississippi. The 13th Amendment banned slavery. I would say she says this is a positive, so I would mark this box. And then my explanation would be something along the lines of she was a slave, and because the 13th Amendment banned slavery, she is now a free person. So in your explanation, probably explain a little bit about what the item is on the left and why you chose whether your person would think it's positive or negative. Once you're done with this page, turn your page over, and then we have this Reconstruction overall section. So overall, would your character think Reconstruction was a success or a failure? Explain why below in at least 5 sentences. So kind of think about a CER at this point. Again, you're going to have today and all of class period tomorrow to work on this. So if you have questions, try to move on and do a different part of this. If you're not confused on some sections of this, move on, because then Mrs. Hines and I will both be back tomorrow to answer any questions that you have.